No.
Your kid does not need to be cool. And your kid does not need to fit in. Your kid needs to not have mental health plague them for the rest of their life because of seeing things they didn't need to see at a young age.
Right. Hello.
Welcome to the Biblically Centered Podcast.
Yes.
Episode numero
6, I think, right?
Well, 6, but yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was not catching
Number
on to
6. Not catching on to my, Spanish.
Yeah, sorry.
My name is Johnny Jordan. This is Danica Jordan, my wife. We are married together in union under the Lord. And Danica is going to grace us with our mission statement.
Love that. Biblically centered equips your family with knowledge and conversations for you to live and defend your Christian faith.
That's right. And like I said, this is episode number 6.
Yes.
So we are moving on to our next virtue, which is virtue E.
Yes.
But virtue E says that we exercise self-control in our words and actions, even when faced with temptation.
Correct. Yes. So this is a good one, an important one. All right. I'm going to give us our definitions because we love our definitions.
We love definitions.
We do. Exercise means to use or practice to acquire a skill. It can also mean preparatory practice or to practice habitually, to train to use.
Good job getting through that.
Thank you. It's early in the morning. So basically you are practicing to gain something. And then 2 definitions, which I thought were important for us to kind of define, and then we can talk about them throughout the rest of the episode, is self-control versus self-discipline. So obviously our virtue says self-control. Self-control means restrain, hold back, suppress, or to curb ungodly desires. But our hope from this virtue is that we would develop self-discipline. And self-discipline means intentional, purposeful managing and determining of what we say or do. So we want to kindle holy desires. So through self-control, we will therefore develop self-discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sort of like this. The discipline is the result of practicing self-control.
Correct. Yeah.
It's kind of like you're getting stronger.
Correct. So the hope would be is as we facilitate and exercise this virtue, that it would develop those traits that then in the future make it easier to say no automatically than to wrestle with that. So you go through the wrestling so that then it's just easier down the road.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in training yourself and saying no to the right things, but also saying saying no to the wrong things and yes to the right things, that kind of thing. It's kind of funny.
Okay.
I'm sitting here drinking this coffee. I promise this might be maybe a long story, but it'll tie back to,
Oh no.
We got to start each episode with a long story.
Okay.
But I'm sitting here drinking this coffee. So the coffee I'm drinking today is Folgers. Okay.
Right.
Which is not the normal coffee that we drink, but we keep it used to be a tin, but now it's plastic, so just a tub.
A tub.
We keep a tub of Folgers in our pantry area for my dad whenever he visits. He likes the Folgers, so we have some here for him. But it was essentially we ran out of our coffee, and I didn't feel like going out and buying more, so I just used his Folgers for this morning. Anyways, but when I taste his Folgers, it brings me back to when I was a young lad, not being allowed to drink coffee in my own home, but going to my friend's house, which I won't name his name on here, but there was a friend of mine I had all growing up who we spent a lot of time at each other's houses on the weekends. His parents drank coffee and let him drink coffee. So I would, you probably know this story, I would drink the coffee at his house, and my parents didn't know. But it was Folgers. And so this, like drinking, so it's weird how the taste profile of Folgers brings me back to that era of my life of being a little kid and drinking this flavor of coffee, playing video games on a Saturday morning, as an 8-year-old, and my parents being none the wiser. I'm not done. And but on a deeper level, there's we've had the conversation around, and I'm sure plenty of parents who listen to this have a conversation around just the notion and the fact that we live in a very unique time. It's unlike the 90s. There is so much media and opportunity for your eyes to see and do things that they don't need to be seeing and doing, at certain stages of life, yada, yada. But we've had conversations around kids being allowed to stay the night at another kid's house. And for me, from my perspective, I'm well, I had great memories growing up, staying the night at my friends' houses. But then when I really, really, really think about it, anything that I did growing up that would maybe caused a temptation or a struggle or just something I had to deal with was usually a byproduct of something that I experienced at a friend's house. You know what I mean? As a very, very young teenager, the first time I saw things on the internet, for lack of better terms, I shouldn't have seen, was at a friend's house. Watching R-rated movies for the first time, that was at a friend's house. And it created struggles or challenges in my life. And so it's just important for parents to know who their kids are spending time with. Mm-hmm. And my friend group was great. I still talk to most of them today. And we've gone through a lot of stuff together. And, now being older, realize some of the stuff we did when we were younger obviously was unwise. But, you're 12, 13, experiencing these things for the first time. And but I think it's important because, there is a little bit of differences between our kids' friend situation and our current environment versus mine. Because mine was, I had really close friends from school, mm-hmm. but our parents weren't in a relationship with each other. My parents weren't friends with his parents or, his parents really. Yeah. Whereas for us, I feel like all of our kids, the friends that they have, we are also in close relationship with their parents. Right. Mm-hmm. So that builds a little bit of trust in terms of the expectations. Not to say that everyone parents the same, but there's kind of a common ground of what we expect in terms of our kids and understand. And we talk about, a lot of them are our life group friends. We talk a lot about the dangers and temptations that we face and also ones that our kids will be facing now. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I say all that to say this coffee this morning plays well into exercising self-control, because when I think about this flavor profile, it just reminds me of some of those times in my life where I didn't exercise self-control because I just wanted to experience these things that were kind of new for me at that stage of life, and we didn't have the parental guidance in that home to even ask what we were doing. We kind of just had free range in the house. Yeah. So does that make sense?
I think so.
Cool. Brought it around, I think. Making friends as an adult, especially for someone like me who I had the fortunate situation to grow up in the same school district, in the same house, same neighborhood, with literally my 4 core friends all through growing up. We all met in preschool or kindergarten, and we all lived in the same houses and went to the same school all through graduation. None of us moved so it was these were my friends. Yeah. This was them. Yeah. I didn't feel like I needed to make a large group of friends. I mean, I had other friends through church and stuff, more acquaintances, but not my core group of friends.
And then we became friends.
And then you do what?
And then we became friends.
And then you and I became friends. And then I had dating's a little bit different motivation, but yeah, then getting married and moving to a new state, and then just not knowing anyone, mm-hmm. and then trying to make new friends. That was a challenge for me.
Yeah, because you hadn't done that in...
Yeah, well, and, for me, being my personality type, almost to a fault, I want my relationships to be meaningful.
Correct.
I don't do very well with surface level stuff. I know it's a skill that I can develop in terms of small talk, but small talk is not my strong suit.
No.
Especially if we're talking about taxes, weather, and grass. It's just, my gosh, what are we talking about? Unless I'm talking to our friend Curtis, who actually...
I was going to say, oh no, you threw Curtis under the bus.
When I say talking about grass, I'm talking about like to the neighbor, like, oh, the grass is green. And you're like, yeah, what kind of seed you let? You know, it's like, I don't know. But like Curtis is different because he's a good friend of ours and his job is like the dude's a wizard. So that's different because it's actually a passion
He actually
for
has
him.
knowledge, yes.
But it's actually something I can talk to him about on
Correct.
on a passion level, not like just to kill time.
Yes.
So it's different.
Okay.
So sorry, Curtis, if you listen to this. So like plenty of people, you know, meeting people in church and in the college we were attending at the time, like you meet people that you're like, oh yeah, they're cool, we can hang out. But in terms of like me feeling like they're a friend, who
your
gets
people.
me.
Yes.
And it was crazy because we went and visited our hometown in Texas a month ago or so.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a friend that I was able to hang out with that I hadn't seen in a decade. But being with that friend who I hadn't seen in such a long time, but who was such a cornerstone friend of mine growing up, it was just kind of like we just clicked right back. Even though like there's a little bit of differences in the paths our lives have taken since high school, there still was like this element of like sitting down together and talking where it's just like we knew each other.
Yeah.
And it was just different.
Yeah.
And so I kind of missed that type of friendship of like we experienced, like I have memories of this kid when he was 5. And now here we are in our 30s, you know, just still talking. So anyways, I'm going to read our first verse so we can keep this truck on the road.
Yes,
Roads
please.
are getting a little slick out there. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it.
Through that verse, we want to teach our kids, obviously everyone else struggles with temptation. However, that verse says that God is faithful and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. And I think sometimes it can be like, oh, I'm tempted, I guess I'm just going to do it. Or, oh, I'm just already here, you know? And it's like, no, like we want to equip our children to know that temptation doesn't mean that you've already done it, that you can stop, and that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because what it also says, I don't know if we'll read the verse, but you know, like Jesus was also tempted as we were, yet without sin. Mm-hmm. You know, I've heard lots of stories of people and they have like a secret text message or emoji with their kids that if their kid ever texts that to them, the parent's like, without question, I will come get you. Like, I don't even care.
And make up a story of like...
The parent will take that on for themselves so the kid doesn't feel like, oh no, everyone's going to think. And so I think that's really important, even when they're young, to just establish that trust of like, hey, temptation, that is okay. Like, I want to help you through that temptation. I'm trying to help you so you don't sin, you know, and just...
Yeah, and that's a good distinction because I know, not necessarily my experience, but I know there's probably a lot of parents who don't have that open door of communication with their kids. Like their philosophy is more so like, man, I hope my kid doesn't mess up. And that's kind of where they leave it. And they don't really sit down with their child and communicate that you're going to be faced with temptation.
Right.
There's going to be things you see that tempt you. There's going to be friends that want you to do things that you know aren't right. But maybe you want to fit in or whatever, and you're going to feel the temptation. Like we understand, like that's a part of life. I mean, even me as an adult, I still face temptations. Mm-hmm. It's just part of it. But I think it's an important, healthy practice for parents to have those conversations with their kids regularly, so that the kids know that like mom and dad are on their side.
Right.
And we're not. The idea is like we're not going to excommunicate you from the family if you mess up, but we want you to know that we get it, that temptation is out there, and if you're being faced with a temptation, that's, you know, talk to us. We want to help. We don't want you to feel like you're on an island facing this temptation, because there's plenty of terribly sad stories out there of especially with social media, of people getting
bullied, blackmailed
by these random people on the internet who like convince them to do something inappropriate on their phone, and then blackmail it that if they don't do this, this, and this, they're going to send these photos out to the wide web. And so, I mean, there's been suicides that have been a byproduct of that, because the kids didn't feel like they had someone they could turn to figure this out.
Right. They thought, I've already gone too far. Like, I've already...
This is going to ruin my life.
Right.
So I just have to...
Right.
Yeah. And that's extremely, extremely sad.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we just want to do everything we can in our power to let our kids know that we are on their side. We understand that temptation, even for the strongest, most godly person temptation is in all of us.
Yeah.
I think the difference between the people who fail and the people who don't most commonly is just the accountability and the community they have in their life to kind of
right. Yeah. If you put in a plan, that's a little easier of like, okay, I'm tempted, but I know my mom can come pick me up because we've already talked about it. If you haven't talked to your kid, then they're like, do I have to call mom? Then I have to explain it. And then it's just like this whole huge thing. Whereas if you've already made it easy, like, hey, I don't care, text or tell me this and I will be there. Then there's like this like, whew, okay, I already know it's going to be taken care of. And then you can give it like a day or two and then come back around and be like, hey, thank you. I'm glad that you let me know about this temptation. Let's kind of talk through that, because I think also in those moments, what you don't want to do is be like, oh no, you were tempted and like get on them. Like you should reward them for admitting that they were tempted. So the whole point of this is that we would be God dependent instead of other dependent. And so it says self-control lends itself to every area of our life. So even through temptation and these things, we want to be dependent on God for getting us through instead of others. Obviously, as a child, they're going to be other dependent, but then you kind of lead them, okay, how do I transfer that to God and be God dependent? And so it says self-control can also be used for things that are good for us. I think everyone's heard the phrase, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So this week was Halloween. We don't go crazy, but the kids did get some candy. And even though candy can be good, too much candy can be a bad thing. And as our 3, 5, and 7-year-olds still haven't learned that, we've had to do some major limiting on the candy eating.
Yeah.
To make sure, because obviously if we were just to let them eat their whole bucket of candy, it would not go well for them nor us having to clean it. So, and that will be built over time with trust. So right now they obviously don't know why they can't eat 17 pieces of candy, but later they might decide to eat it or sneak it, and then they will find out.
Yeah.
Oh, mom and dad were actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
And so self-control also can apply to things other than our actions. So a lot of this has just been things that we're doing, but self-control can also be our thoughts or our attitude. I know that we tell our kids a lot, like, you are in control of your attitude. So if you are tempted to be mad at your brother over that, or if you are tempted to be, upset about this, like, let's think through, is that action or is that attitude worth it for that situation? And so even with our thoughts, that's a big one to try to help our kids understand and recognize that they are in control of their thoughts.
Yeah. And also teaching the importance of taking those thoughts captive.
Yeah.
And like this ties back to the temptation side thing too, because like we said, temptations, they come, and most commonly they start with a thought. And so like the ability to take your thoughts captive, and I mean, it is something you have to train. It's like when the thought enters your mind, don't entertain it, but learn to take every thought captive. Like for me, a lot of times if I'm faced with a thought that I know isn't of God, or a thought that is putting me in some sort of temptation, like I'm that crazy guy who will sometimes just murmur under my breath, like speaking to it to go away kind of thing, or like, Christ in me is bigger than you, those kind of things. And it helps. I mean, as silly as it is, I try not to do it if I'm in public, but.
Well, no, and you help me with that too. I think sometimes I can wake up or things can happen with the kids.
Are you talking about this morning?
No, this morning was fine.
Oh, okay.
It was fine, everyone. But those times where I have in my life thought or texted Johnny, like, I can't do it. How am I going to make it through the day? Those kind of things. He's like, okay, but what are you telling yourself? Because you're telling yourself you can't do it. Like that's not a good place to start from, because then you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I can't. And then it's just on and on and on. Whereas if you're like, no, you know what? I have done this however many days. God has helped me. We will make it through school. We will make it. And I think you just have to, speaking the word to yourself and over your situation is so important. Obviously, prayer as well. But if you're able to find those Bible verses that can help kind of pull you out of those times where you feel a little funky or a little in the ditch, that's really important and can be really helpful. So,
I mean, there's a lot of lies we believe about ourselves that are not from anyone else's mouths.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of my coworkers I used to work with always dealt with, like, anytime there was a photo of her, she'd always make a comment like, oh, I don't like the way I look or my hair or this or, and it's just, I asked her, I was like, has anyone ever actually said these things to you? Like all the things, like every time you have a photo that you always comment on, has anyone ever said those things to you? She's like, well, no. I was like, so who is telling you? Like it literally is just a lie that you're believing about yourself.
Right.
And now you're convinced that the whole world also thinks these things about you. When in reality, it just started as a thought that you believed as truth. And now you've turned it into part of your personality as being just lacking self-confidence for something that most of the world probably doesn't even think is true.
Right.
So, but that's a good question. Like even when Adam and Eve were naked and God says, who told you you were naked? It's like that same kind of thought. It's like these people who are believing the things they believe. It's like, well, who told you that? Because that's not in the word. We don't think that about you.
Yeah.
People aren't saying that about you. So what is it? Who told you those things about you that you're believing is truth?
Yeah. And I think you and I have finally gotten to this, we're in our 30s, mid-30s. Oh my gosh, mid-30s. Anyways, but I think at this point in our life, it's like you think about, okay, I think about myself how much during the day. Like it's a lot. You just naturally, obviously, are thinking about yourself. And it's like, okay, if you were to really think about it, everyone else is also thinking that about themselves. Their attention is not actually on you as much as you think it is. So it's like no one's actually thinking about you.
Yeah.
Okay. Our problem isn't always that we do the wrong thing. It's that we don't do the right thing. Almost like the Samaritan.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
It's like no one did the wrong thing per se, but no one did the right thing except for the Samaritan.
Right.
So the priest and the other gentleman, you could say they were in the wrong, but were they really doing the wrong thing? No, because culturally they were doing what they were taught to do, but the Samaritan actually did the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So teaching our kids that there is power in doing the right thing, even if no one else is going to do that. Like sometimes it's not enough to do just nothing. Sometimes you do have to act and do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what we want for our kids is this path of self-control to self-discipline, to them being able to have that framework to be able to listen to God's voice and do the right thing.
Yeah.
Is that it's becomes a byproduct of who we are.
Yeah.
Because we obviously know that like we're not saved by our good works, but we are saved for a good work.
Right.
And so now that we have Christ and the Holy Spirit, it's like as we're in step with the Holy Spirit, like the fruits of that is what we want our life to be. Because doing the right thing can still be self-serving if you're doing it for some sort of notoriety or some sort of check mark or to make yourself feel better. I mean, it's still nice to do the right thing, but we want doing the right thing just to be a byproduct of the overflow of.
Correct. So our hope is, because this is virtue E, so we've had A, B, C, and D obviously before. That's the alphabet. Way to go.
Wow.
I know you guys. So we've already taught our kids to adore and revere God. We've talked to them about belief in the Holy Spirit. We've talked to them about committing their lives to Christ. And we've talked to them about being dedicated to getting to know God.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the four, I would say, main pillars of this whole thing that we've written. And so this is the first one where it's like, okay, these are some of my choices that I'm going to start making in my life, but I'm going to make those choices in accordance to the pillars that I already have. So I'm going to make my choices based on my belief in God, my adoration for him, my dedication. And so, like you said, it's a byproduct of the things that we've already gone over and put in place.
Yeah.
It's not always just about killing our sin. It's about cultivating the fruits of righteousness, which I think that goes along with kind of what we just said. So the things that you want in your life, you want to grow and make those the big things. And then I think it's easier to kind of pluck out the things that aren't good.
Right. Yeah. And we've talked about cultivating a few times on this podcast so far, but
it's a good verb.
It is a good verb, especially, and I always like the fruits of righteousness kind of comparison, and, the fact that like we're going to be known by our fruit, and like you can't produce a fruit that's not in your roots, if that makes sense. And so the importance of understanding your roots or your foundation and those things being solid and secure, and then the life that is produced from that will be the life that's produced from that. Yeah. But you can't just be staring at your branches, looking at the fruit of your life and being like, I should change my fruit. And then just start plucking on the fruit off and hoping something else will grow. It's not going to work. Yeah. You have to, it's a root thing.
Plant and cultivate the other aspects, right?
Even deeper, like a tree coming from a seed, and oftentimes a seed is a thought, just the importance of your thoughts, like really practicing getting the bad thoughts out of there.
Well, yes. Well, and I think to go along with these virtues and why we've made them small little snippets. So their first thought is, if they're tempted, is they're going to go, I exercise self-control in my words and actions and even faced with temptation. Like that will be their first thought. And I say it in that tone as if I'm a teenager, like about to do something. I'm like, my mom and dad have told me this for 10 years, like... But those are the things that you want to be on instant recall. And then those will be the virtues that as seeds are planted and then have been nurtured and watered layer over layer, cultivating this garden of these various fruit/virtues.
Yeah.
Philippians 1:6. I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. That's funny, the hymn we're going through at our co-op. So he's beginning these good works in us, and he will bring them to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. So obviously we will not be made perfect until we are reunited with Christ. I believe the hymn is called Christ Forevermore. We've been going over it at our co-op. But it ties in so well to this verse in Philippians 1:6, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. So we were talking about, on Tuesday, we were talking about how obviously we will be perfected and reunited at completion, in heaven with Christ. But then we were also talking about how we are able to help complete the works of Christ here on earth through sharing the gospel, through how we live our lives. And so, that we would love God and others, and we are able to help complete the work that Christ came to do. And so some things to just kind of ask ourselves and to ask our children about this virtue is, what do we want ruling over us, and how do we distinguish ourselves from the world? And I would think, if we think about culture, how much do you see self-control is not people's go-to? And so what are people being ruled by? They're being ruled by agendas, self-care. I mean, there's all these things that it's like, I'm being ruled over by, because that's the pressure, that's what I've been told, or I haven't been taught self-control. So it's really hard for grown people to not do this if they've never been trained. And so we want to help our children, again, with even with their thoughts and attitudes and actions. Like, you are in control of those. And because we've given our lives to Christ, we're going to institute self-control to help us, so that when you do grow and get older, you will be self-disciplined to continue to foster those things that we want to in our life, and to stay away from the things that we do not. you're just setting them up for easier success. You know, you don't want your children to be ruled by the whims of culture, or or then you can even go down, you know, or ruled by food, or ruled by looks, or trying to people please. I mean, there's so many things that this virtue really covers, and it's really important to help our kids be able to know what it is, how to do it, to set them up.
Yeah, it's good. I always find it interesting how contrary to the scripture the world is, because you know the world kind of preaches that like almost that like sin is freedom.
Right.
They're like, you know, being free to do whatever you want. That's freedom. That's life. That's liberation. Mm-hmm. But we know as Christians that is enslavement.
Right.
And
bondage.
I think we're seeing a lot of the fruit of that in our culture, just because of all of the quote unquote liberation we've been experiencing as a culture for the past several decades, and now it's just kind of all collapsing in on itself. And and now, I mean, we're just very, 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 very confused. We don't know up or down as a society, and I think it's just a byproduct of just this lie that not having self-control and doing whatever you want is the path to a fulfilled life.
Right.
But it's not.
No. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." So he's already given that to us. And I know maybe we've used this analogy before. We will continue to use it. Like you have muscles and like you have things that you want to develop, you have to practice.
Yeah, we do.
So we are practicing love. We are practicing self-control. We are practicing, you know, having the power of God. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, as your child grows, you have to help them practice. And that will take time and effort, and all these things do, right? But we know that it's going to pay off. Mm-hmm. It's going to be worth it for us as parents. It's going to be worth it for our children. Yeah. You know.
And that's a great thing to tell your kids, that God, I mean, that the spirit of fear is not from God. He gave us power, love, and self-control. Yeah. And like even with one of our kids right now who's kind of, he's battled a little bit for, I don't know,
like 2 months.
2 months maybe with, and I think he's maybe only had 2 actual bad dreams, but literally just continuing to try to instill in him the fact that like that fear is that's not from God. And that is something that we can take authority over. And so just continuing to pray and believe, you know, that like just even thinking about the past 2 nights, I feel like we've hit it a little bit more strong on the head with like, you're not going to have bad dreams. We're going to pray that, you know, and then he slept great the past couple nights. But I think it's just important for him to understand that he's not defeated because he had a bad dream. Right.
Well, and setting him up, you know, obviously when you lay a kid down and they're, I don't want to have a bad dream. I don't want to think about this and that. And you're like, then why? Then don't think about it right now. You know, like we believe God is going to give you great, happy dreams. What are some dreams that you would like, you know, like we try to redirect and give him not things to be fearful of before you go to bed. Like we'll try not to think of the monsters, try not to think, you know, because that would be all he would think about. But we try to, no, you don't have to think about that. We see good things all day long. We talk about good things all day long. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that you're going to dream about. And you're right. He has done better. All right. When we resist temptation, we learn to notice its strengths, faces, and tactics. It prepares us for future run-ins with those temptations. And I think that goes back to self-discipline of being able to manage and determine, you know, what we're going to say or do. So again, just the enemy is trying to learn about you and your faults. And if you can already pre-program some of those responses, you're going to do better in the long run. So knowing like, oh, I am always tempted to get cake when I go to the mall or somewhere, you know.
The mall serves cake?
I don't know. I don't know.
Do people eat cake at the mall?
I mean, I like cookie cake. I haven't been to the mall in a while, but every time I go, I'm like, you know what? I should probably just check out Great American Cookie. Mm-hmm. So if there are things that you naturally do in certain situations.
I gotta say, ever since Bake Sale has opened.
That's your local.
That's a local bakery that a friend of ours is
Yes.
a wizard behind making.
Did you see the new cookie that's out for this month? It's like Thanksgiving in a cookie. It's
got stuffing in it.
Bourbon, pecan, brown sugar, caramel. I don't know. I just read about it. It sounded really good.
I'm sure it's great. But ever since we had their cookies, Great American Cookie to me has just kind of lost a little bit of its luster.
Okay, well, I was trying to make another great metaphor here.
Sorry, go for it. But for those of you who are in the Wichita, Kansas area,
just
go to Bake Sale because they're the best cookies you can get.
That's where we are, everybody. Okay, but if you go grocery shopping and if every time you go down the ice cream aisle, you have to buy some ice cream, then maybe don't go down that aisle or have someone else go to the grocery store or et cetera, et cetera.
That's a great way, husbands, to get your wives to go do the grocery shopping because you're too tempted.
But look for those natural patterns. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Look for those natural patterns to where you are naturally tempted, like even in your children. They are naturally tempted to have a tantrum if they're put down 30 minutes later, or if this happens, or, try to help sort of facilitate those so that you can help them be like, hey, last time that was a really bad idea after you did that. So maybe let's not do that this time. Try to help them kind of notice those things of, oh, every time I hit my brother, he's going to punch me back. Well, maybe don't hit your brother.
Yeah, and even just from some of the conversations we've had at church and stuff, like temptation, it's not going to bed anytime soon. Like it is very alive and active in all of our lives. And we have more temptation. I feel like I can boldly say we have more temptation now than probably ever in human history, just because we have access to so much. Like, we are not dictated by the culture as Christians. Like, the culture is going to keep putting out new things, new experiences, new stuff. And like, as a parent, you have to have discernment not to allow the things in your home that aren't going to serve the purpose of your home. And like, even like our pastor said before, like if you can't overcome temptation on your phone, even with all the filters, like there's a workaround for everything, the whatever. Like if you, it's like, maybe it's time for you to downgrade to a dumb phone. That's what he says, because like, what would you rather? Would you rather have the phone and lose your life or have a less functioning phone, but then begin to not have that temptation in your palm every day. And so it's just important for you to use wisdom and discernment to see the things in your life that are causing temptation or causing time sucks or whatever it may be, and then take the steps to not allow those things to control you.
What is it? I think the brain isn't fully formed until you're like 25.
Yeah.
Your child, I'll do a little call out. Your child does not need unlimited access to an iPhone or to a phone with internet at any point during middle school now.
Yeah, I wish we had the statistics, but they say
school,
like like the average age for kids to see
porn is 9
for the first time
is 9. Yeah.
Which is crazy. And even thinking, like I mentioned earlier, like the first time I experienced those types of images, I think I was probably 12 or 13, and it was like on a friend's laptop, and you had to like seek it out to find it. And we still were to do that. And now it's like, literally, it's not difficult.
No.
And so if you are a parent who has given your child, whatever age they are, a phone, or I guess better yet, a smartphone, one that has internet access, and you are not monitoring it, like you got to, because statistically speaking, they've already seen a lot. So,
and again, they already know those. They know those workarounds. Yeah. I'm a part of some group. The kids are sneaky. Yeah. They have not developed self-control.
Yeah. I mean, there was a story that came out with YouVersion, the Bible app, that teenagers were getting in the YouVersion and were able to manipulate things to be able to do inappropriate things communication wise.
Right.
And their parents just think, oh, my kid was on the YouVersion app for 6 hours today. And it's like, why was my kid reading the Bible for 6 hours? It doesn't seem like Timmy.
Right. But if you haven't fostered these virtues in them, then they don't know. And the amount of hormonal dopamine hits that they are getting from the excitement, which all of these things bring, because they haven't developed self-control. And then you are just being like, here, hope that you're able to figure it out. It's like, no, you have to help your child understand, know why. And if your child has already gone down that road, it is okay to be the bad parent and say, I have to go back on my word. You do not get a phone. I think some people are afraid to step on their kids' toes. And it's like, for my child's safety and for their well-being, I would hope that you would want to develop self-control in them for the future. Set them up.
For the love of everything holy, don't let the reason you give your kid a phone be so that they can fit in with their friends.
Oh my gosh.
Listen, we do social media for Biblically Centered, and I, with much chagrin or whatever the term is, we have a TikTok, which I've always been anti-TikTok.
Yes.
But now we have one for Biblically Centered, and so we'll post things in there 2 or 3 times a week. But like, it's weird, and I'm not even talking about like inappropriate like things. I'm just talking about like philosophies, worldviews, trends that are just so prominent on TikTok. And I know that little girls, parents we know who are just giving their kids smartphones at young ages, and they're all learning the TikTok dances. Well, then you have your kid who is, playing on some team with these kids, and they don't fit in because they don't know these TikTok dances. So I'm going to give them a smartphone so they can, fit in. It's like, no. That's not a reason to give your kid a phone. I understand some parents who will give their kid, they have some kid quote unquote dumb phones where it's like you can text and call.
Yeah.
I can understand some validity to that, if you just need to access communication with your kids. But to give your kid a all access pass to the internet when they're, 12 or under and just hoping for the best, I was a good kid.
Oh.
Even still to this day, even knowing all of the mistakes and things I did and things I wish I did differently and struggles I have in my own life, looking from the outside in, I was one of the good kids. And I still had these issues and struggles. And so don't think because your kid is a good kid that they're not going to be tempted. We have to help set our kids up better for success.
Yeah. And
trying to make your kid cool and fit in that's not, especially in this day and age, that's not a virtue. No. Your kid does not need to be cool, and your kid does not need to fit in. Your kid needs to not have mental health plague them for the rest of their life because of seeing things they didn't need to see at a young age.
Right.
I'd rather my kid be a dork and live until they're 80 than be super cool and in the in crowd and battle with depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts at a young age.
Right. I was raised in a bubble, and there for a little while I was like, oh, I was kind of weird. And now I am so, so, so thankful that I grew up in a bubble and still kind of keep myself in a bubble. Mm-hmm. We can keep ourselves sheltered from the world, not in a bad way. Obviously, we're going to interact with the world, but we want our children to be prepared for that world. And so to prepare them, we have to kind of shelter them now, make sure their foundation is secure, make sure that their self-confidence in Christ and who he made them is above all the top thing in their life, and not what so-and-so says or this person or that person, or if they think I'm cool. No, my confidence is in Christ and who he made me, so that then when they're older, they can share that with their friends of no, God made you to look like that. That is amazing. Or God gave you this, or, we want to help our children. The last virtue, I'll give it away. Virtue Z is about sharing the gospel. And we can only effectively share the gospel if we have a picture of Christ and God and who he is accurately in our life. And so if we don't give our children the tools to see that clearly, then they will not be able to communicate that effectively. And so when they have friends who are going down these roads of self-harm and depression and things, our kid is not going to be equipped. And grown adult, our kids are not equipped right now to do that. Some kids might be, but that should not be the pressure on them. Like, you want to set your child up so that when they are an adult, they will be around these same friends who have gone through a decade of self-doubt, harm, of who even knows all the other things they will have dealt with. And your child will be able to say, hey, actually, you don't need to think those things about yourself. And actually, I know who God says you are, and you don't have to be depressed about that. It doesn't matter what situation you are in. Christ has defeated it. He and you is stronger than the world. And they'll be able to build those people up because they themselves were built up. Sorry, that was
powerful.
Thank you.
And it even
That's
goes to
a very
show
long rant, but just like the importance of keeping your child. And I don't like using the word sheltered, but you are sort of taking the brunt of that for them. We are putting them in this nice little home, keeping out the wind and the rain and everything so that their faith and, like we've talked about, their roots can be strong so they can have these fruits, so that then who are people going to look to? They're going to look to those who are established, who are confident, who do have answers for things, because right now people don't have answers for things and they're turning to everything. So we want our children and ourselves to be people that are standing firm. And so when someone's like, I have a question about this, they've always stood firm to what they believed. I'm going to ask them. And I think in my own life, I've struggled with that of like, I am a very black and white person. Obviously, I know that there are some gray areas that I do have, but for the most part, I am very black and white on a lot of things. And I've struggled with like being judged for those things, or how does that come across? But I always go back to, I want to be known for this so that if in the future that person is needing advice or something on that, they know black and white where I stand, so that they can come back and be like, okay, I know you're pretty firm on this. Why?
It's good. I mean, simply put, like you use the term like being in a bubble, and I get, like, from a worldly perspective, the negative connotation that can come along with that. And it's not so much that we're trying to not expose our kids to certain, well, what's the best way to say it? You said it great. The idea is that we are nurturing them to give them strength.
Right. And then I think as you are fostering and cultivating these things, you're able to bring in maybe a little bit at a time. Like, I know our daughter, I think 2 years ago, our curriculum went through a lot of different worldviews. And that was a little daunting, but it was like, we have our firm foundation. We have our bubble that we've kept her in. She knows what we believe. So now, one at a time, I'll be able to bring in and say, okay, ancient Greeks believed XYZ. What do we think about that? Okay, well, Paul actually went, and we're able to kind of bring that in just a little bit at a time. So we're maybe choosing opportunities to bring up these things that kids will face with in culture, but we're not just giving them free reign and then being like, oh my gosh, you learned about 12 things today.
That's an important attribute of parenting, is that you are taking ownership of your child's development.
Right.
And I know, culturally speaking, like, that is not what the culture wants. The culture wants your kid to be fed in your home, but then to be nurtured and developed by culture and whatever, so that they can fit into this world that exists beyond our walls. And while obviously, yes, we do want our kids to be a functioning member of society and to provide goods and services to society and to point people to Christ, but we don't want them to be raised in the world. And people are like, well, that's kind of brainwashing your kid. And it's like, yeah, their brains need to be washed a little bit. Like you're telling me you don't think the world is brainwashing kids?
Right.
Like, you don't think the curriculums that they're teaching in California is the reason that there's these spikes and all these crazy ideologies in California? That's not brainwashing. And I think, being, like washing our kids' brains in the blood of Christ, like it's pretty good. It needs to happen while they're in our home. So.
Yeah, we've been told we've been crazy for indoctrinating our children. And I think my question would be like, but aren't you also indoctrinating your children?
Yeah.
Everyone is being indoctrinated.
Yeah.
It's just like I'm going to choose for my family that, yes, we will indoctrinate them.
Yeah.
In Christ. And I love what you said. Like, yes, we have to wash them in the blood of Jesus. I think that's really.
I saw a little GIF, or not GIF, it was a little short video yesterday, and it's just, those people who go on the streets just to like interview people randomly and ask them questions. And this guy, and this is just an example of like how open-mindedness is not in fact open-mindedness. It's just a form of an indoctrination as well. He's like, "Are you okay with young kids transitioning?" "Yes." "To Christianity?" "No." Well, there you go. So you're okay with them transitioning as long as it's in the ideology of your worldview that you've adopted.
Right.
But you're not open-minded, because if your kid, you'd also be open-minded to the idea of them living a life for Christ. But, I would venture to say that's probably not the case for most. So, okay, well, we need to cut this off. Good job keeping this one short, babe.
Sorry, did we not exercise self-control?
Not with our time.
Sorry. All right.
I'll be able to edit it down a little bit, I think, so we'll see what the end result is. But, whew. Any last tidbits?
No, thank you. Like, subscribe. We appreciate it. That helps spread it to more people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like I said, the last episode, we do have, all these virtues are centered around our curriculum, which is 98%
yes
completed and will be available, and is a great resource for you to adopt at any stage of your kid's life and an institute. So we'll have more info on that soon. So thank you for listening, and we will see y'all next time.
Bye.
There you go.